camera faces that way. And I'm all done with the chocolate milk. And, screw it. I'm just gonna leave that back there. So, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. And, welcome to another episode of Fuck It, Who Needs Sleep Anyway? Who needs sleep? The less sleep I get, the less I tend to enunciate. What can I say? But I've certainly been keeping my brain working overtime. Because the more, let's say, different aspects of what would be required for a required. I could probably enunciate if I tried to do like a Scottish accent. But for what would be required for a unifying theory of everything. Maybe that's why Scotch roll their R's, because otherwise they'd be too drunk to enunciate them. I have to increase my Scottish accent so I don't slur my speech. I know, it's horrible. I don't even do a good Scottish, but yeah, it's funny. So, previously on the other channel, I was discussing kind of what led me to this. Because to finish up the story I was telling on there before I was interrupted by, the eventful events of the evening. I was explaining sort of the prefacery lead up to it. But basically, once I had decided on the reason why I had to address the issue, that very same morning yesterday, I just kind of reviewed the history of quantum mechanics from several different people's perspectives here on YouTube, and, you know, seemed thorough enough. Started doing some of my own little projections. Wound up having to look up some formulas, do some calculations, after trying to make up my own formulas with limited success. When it came to the point where I had to remember whether to use sine, cosine, or tangent, I was like, oh, fuck. I'm going back to school. Let me Google something. Well, I'm here. But it would take me, certainly going back to some review courses and the use of expressions before I could come up with a formula to explain this theory. But fortunately, for those who wish to consider this or test this theory, it seems to me that existing quantum mechanics formulas still apply. And I'll explain why with hopefully graphic reference in a minute. But think of it this way. Uh, Lightning doesn't strike from the cloud, but it still comes from the cloud. So when you have a wave that resolves into a particle, it's the place where the particle is going to be that is basically the grounding point. Anyways, get to that in a minute. But first, I want to get into what I mean by spherical resonance. Yeah, I did some, I was just kind of experimenting in real time, and I did some crappy little renderings of some atoms here. I'll turn the phone upside down, so I don't have to turn that upside down. And what I was explaining is how this accounts for all known effects of radiologic resonance, electromagnetic energy, radioactivity, the half-life of an element, and because it eliminates the particle, it actually resolves it does in fact resolve. It can be used to resolve special relativity, or basically making it not so special. Now, that's because when you have a waveform in motion as opposed to a particle, you simply have a transitioning or a revectorization, or whatever you want to call it, of the wave. So, speed is still relative, but you don't have any sort of bizarre effects on time. However, because of the rate of perception, I suppose, or the way that the function is modified, or the way the waveform itself is modified, I suppose an object might appear to, like if something that you're looking at is approaching the speed of light and somebody's waving to you on it, their hand might look really slow. That's about it. That's it. To them, their hand wouldn't actually be moving slow. You'd just be seeing it move slow. Or possibly just stretched out and weird looking. One of the two. Anyways. But that's kind of beside the main point that I wanted to get across here. Something was standing out to me about these, and that was the way that these looked like the so-called dimensions that have been detected. on the one hand, that made me speculate as to whether there was some sort of a 0-point modulation actually centralized within each atom that sustains the vibration itself, that sustains the overall coalescing vibration. But I start to doubt whether that necessarily needs to be the case when I look at some more detailed probability and, you know, I just mean like field flow probability. I'll put my experience and my feel for the way things work against any supercomputer any day. But this was just my first little attempt at drawing. And as soon as I drew it, I hated it. But it kind of looked like a donut. So I was like, screw it. This, however, is a little more thoughtful as far as renderings go. Now, you can consider this to be a sequence. Frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can see these two guys are identical but opposite. So essentially, negative and positive aren't just things that sit there. You know, it's not as though there's a little tiny magnet or like atoms are little compasses, you know. Negative and positive are forces. It's a result of energy going one way and being pulled another, or being pulled that way, basically. Positive is, you know, depending on how you look at it, when you get to quantum mechanics, it's kind of ass backwards. But, you know, when you connect a car battery, for instance, you get your negative lead and your positive lead. In this case, positive has the negative charge. It has the electrons, right? It has the particles. No, it has the wave form. Those waves resonate. See, picture this little pyramid right here, three-dimensionally, as these different. Just picture that as a bunch of different these. Okay. That membrane of resonance harmonizes from one atom to the next through a wire and provides electricity to your starter and your spark plugs, etc. A little more complicated than that, but you know, this ain't a car guy video. But, okay, so the thing about non-particle quantum mechanics is it eliminates the Big Bang. It's very hard to get elements that have waveforms that start from their centers as opposed to that coalesce from particles eventually, right? So when faced with the similarity to the so-called interdimensional structures that people have found, and you know, the visual representations are kind of silly and weird, but they want to call them dimensions, and they just happen to look kind of like these things I'm picturing. And what if there's some sort of interdimensional 0-point modulation type shit happening at the middle of these, well, orbs? And that could be where they come from, where, like, basically creation. It could be time. It could be the absence of time. It could be antimatter in the middle of there. But then, like I was saying earlier, when I really drew this out and considered where the modulation was, where the negative and the positive flowed, if you picture energy as causality, basically, not a particle. This is negative, this is positive. Negative and positive, negative and positive. Comes out, and it's negative. And it goes positive, and it's negative. And then positive, and it's negative. Okay? But quantum mechanics comes into play because it never actually goes in a direction. That's where it gets complicated. That's what I mean by the existing equations should work. Now, it seems to me as though this could sort of sustain itself. Okay? I still think it's very likely that there's a interdimensional quark-like core. Okay? But I know everybody's sitting there thinking, well, I guess people have already stopped watching because they're like, what about the nucleus? Well, that's further down on the page. I've already accounted for that. And, you know, we got to talk about radiation and isotopes if we're going to talk about the nucleus. And I wouldn't be bothering to present this if I hadn't at least accounted for all of that. But you have to understand how these waves interact spherically with each other. If you picture many of them coalescing together, you wind up with sort of like a planet with an ocean. Okay? Now, not a valid formula. I was just trying to express it in a way that I could remember what the hell I was looking at. But basically, this means that the neutron is equivalent to the energy relative to the expansion of the overall diameter. Okay? So, basically, if the frequency is such that this atom is, in this case, nitrogen, all right? You're going to have, and this is a crude representation because I was just trying to jot it down really quickly. This is meant to represent the negative and positive flow that's perceived as 7 negative, 7 positive. All right. And I don't even know if there is a isotope of nitrogen. It's just the number of squiggles I fucking drew happened to be 7, so I called it nitrogen. All right. So I made a slightly bigger group of 7 squiggles. And because the amplitude overall is bigger, the isotopic resonance basically is 1 point higher. So this becomes perceivably as having 8 neutrons. but it's actually just the resonance that's being detected as neutrons. And it's the resonance itself, when disrupted or when escalated, causes the emission of bright line spectrums, or the conductivity of electricity, or the emission of radiation in the case of larger isotopes. So imagine, an ocean of water, all the different waves. There's going to be that one point of resonance where the waves clap up together and the water spurts up into the air. Well, that's radiation. And when you're talking about your heavier elements and their half-lives, or your isotopes and their half-lives, you're talking about that resonance cycle and how long it takes for those particles, or not particles, for those quantities of basically causality to be ejected. Now, this doesn't negate the quantization of energy, although it does kind of multiply everything by 2 and divide it in half at the same time, depending on how you use it. But to understand that, you really need to first understand what I wanted to get into earlier, was about why it grounds, why this accounts for uncertainty and like quantum uncertainty and quantum entanglement and the different seemingly weird interdimensional aspects of physics. But apparently, instead of solving that problem, I drew a spaceship. A much faster spaceship. Anyways. There we go. Here's a little drawing for you. With a nice big fat alien head. And he's a special boy, what can I say? So picture it this way. You have radiation, okay? A wave stretching out like a membrane. One photon at a time. A photon is actually a membrane, okay? And it resolves in your eyeball. Now it's resolving here, it's resolving here, it's resolving on the world's ugliest flower. It's resolving on the leaves of the world's ugliest flower. It's resolving on the ground. It's resolving on a little piece of poo that the dog left. This is energy. This is the positive side of the battery cable. You are the negative side of the battery cable. You are the ground. First, your eyeball is the ground. And now, because there's so much fucking shit hitting your eyeball, I mean, a lot of radiation and reflected radiation, your eyes have to be nice and pretty and reflective, and they have to be surrounded by a white hyper-cooling substance. Very, very efficient cooling mechanism there. You're welcome. And then it conducts electrically to your brain, where you have an idea of what the fuck you're looking at. And then that electricity conducts through your brain into the rest of your body, as heat and as random electric resonance. And then it goes out into the atmosphere, and it goes into the ground. And eventually, it could form a volcano, and it could burst out into the air, and then you would see it, and then it would all happen all over again. Or it could just, grow the world's ugliest flower, and you could sniff it, and probably wouldn't smell very good. But you know what? That smell would be a series of molecules with waveforms resonating off of your neurochemical molecules. And their resonant interference is how you'd know what the fuck it smelled like. You're not exchanging a particle of electricity. It's a wave. You're connecting with it. You know, they say, we're all connected. Well, you're connected to sunlight, to moonlight, to every breath that anyone has ever taken, to every sound that anyone has ever made, to every light that has ever shined. You're connected to it right now. Because that resonance, that causality, continues throughout the universe. Now, I keep thinking, what about the different valence levels of electrons? Resonance waves. Now, I'm just going to use this as an analogy because it is easiest to make sense. But here I have a representation of what it would look like. From Earth, if the Earth was round and you look up at the stars, based on their waveforms, you would see more stars than they were. Oh, and by the way, this also works with cosmic strings, because guess what I just managed to accidentally make there by having several distant waveforms coalescing in one spot tangent to each other. When they become so stretched out, they become straight, and they find a place where they start to coalesce. That'd be as good a reason as any for cosmic strings to develop. Anyways. And if you think I'm misunderstanding cosmic strings, just scale it up a little. There you go. Anyways. Yes, I just postulated how long it would take the average human geek to... Never mind. Okay. But the fascinating thing about this is you would have essentially increased artifacting, sort of mirages, if you will, of stars appearing in front of the stars at these places where multiple lines intersect. And these could appear as anything from bizarre formations to giant star systems, when in fact it's several stars really, really, really far away, spaced way, way far apart. In fact, we may not even be able to see these stars. We're just seeing a whole fucking universe of reflections and mirages, for all we know. Scale it up. You gotta think big. But basically, at the point where, say, several galaxies worth of waves coalesce against several other galaxies worth of waves and several other galaxies worth of waves, all in the same place, and it just happens to form a big tangent, you would have an actual cosmic string fragment that would be basically super dense energy. So, if this theory is correct, I've postulated a way it can be tested, but that's the one thing I'm not going to go ahead and divulge on this video. But if this theory is correct, it accounts for quantum uncertainty and entanglement. It accounts for special relativity as a function of wave resonance. It accounts for all forms of radiation and radiation response. Kind of explains plasma and antimatter as well. Wow. But it kind of makes plasma and antimatter look more like opposites as opposed to matter and antimatter. Well, that's fascinating. Anyways. So, that's all. For now, I guess. I managed to impress my dad. He's a mathematician. He knows a lot about the shit that I'm arguing against here, so to have impressed him impressed me. Surprised me, you know. But he actually wants to come help. Wouldn't that be lovely? He just all at once. He said, I was just thinking about coming out there and helping you with your inventions and stuff. And then I hit him with this. He's like, I'm selling the condo. But anyways, I guess that's going to be all for the broadcast. Just in case you were interested in the spaceship, I suppose I can show that right quick. Basically, I wanted more atmospheric power and to not add any moving parts to do so. So this is essentially an electro-resonant ramjet, and I know the aerodynamics doesn't look right, and that's intentional because the waveforms have to be right. Waveforms are more important than the aero as far as the way I have this rendered. The actual aero can be resolved later, obviously, but then you'd have to kind of it would be a refinement because of the the additional complications in the manufacturing process. But I like to illustrate things in near prototype form. So, anyways, what I have is basically staged pulse resonance taking place on the inside of a cylindrical chamber, including a inversion at the end for the ability to reverse the engines, air brakes, and you may notice these external probes, and they are made to provide a finalizing burst of resonance from their tips and then from their center outward, creating an extremely long magnetic pulse from which to propel from. And well, my theory about quantum entanglement being a function of wave grounding, not a function of particle teleporting. I mean, leave it to the crazy Jesus guy to come up with something that doesn't involve shit that sounds like magic. These are waves. It's causality. It's like, a vibration making a vibration make. The thing is, the one thing about this is, it seems to me that the elements themselves sort of are spontaneously existing. Because I can't, well, I can actually picture exactly what it would take to make an element. And I'm pretty sure the universe isn't surrounded by billions of these machines, because they're huge to begin with, just for one element. Essentially, you would have to cause those waves simultaneously, and like what a particle accelerator does. It doesn't accelerate a particle, it linearizes a membrane. It, well, not linearizes, it particleizes a membrane. It's a particle creator. So, whoever's there who just hit the thumbs up, thank you for your thumbs up. And if you have any other aspects of quantum mechanics or physics that you're wondering whether or not this seems like it resolves, I'll try to apply it and give you my best guess. Because I'd really like to hear if there's anything I'm missing here. because, I mean, when it comes down to like why Tesla was banned, basically, why resonance research was so dangerous, why resonance could be so powerful, this model of the atom makes that make a whole lot more sense. You know, particles bouncing off of each other. You're not talking about an like cohesive energy transfer. But when you're talking about waves, basically everything becomes a wire. Like this is just one giant super processor called reality. And as a mystic, the vibrations that I feel just, they seem so much more in focus to me now that I think of matter this way. I can't explain it. It's just consider how connected that makes everything. Not just everything now, but everything that ever happened and everything that ever will happen. It's rather profound. It's not even a matter of particles. It's a matter of waves. One thing I find interesting is to think of the implications on this for nuclear fission. For instance, if you are using a certain frequency to cause a molecule to fizz, at least when it comes to smaller molecules, you should be able to adapt a similar process to essentially make that atom, not molecule, singular, atom, molecule disappear. You should be able to cancel out its wave functions. That'd be an interesting test of the theory in general, actually. But obviously pretty complex. I think the big machine in Europe could probably do it, but it would have to be tuned to the right frequencies. But here's a big if that I find enticing, which for me is like the reason why this theory is worth exploring, because if it's correct, it means that it's only a matter of time before enough data... Dingo! Dingo! Cut it out! Cut it out. Freaking... Anyways. Oh, I hope I get to take him to the vet soon. We got another couple leads on vets in town. He's got like a cold on top of all the other shit that's going wrong with him. That's enough to worry me. because he's got something wrong with his nose, and now he's got a cold too, so it's like getting clogged up and shit. You okay, Dingo? You're gonna be 12 years old, Dingo. Getting old. Oh god, I need to stop. Freaking smoking all my cigarettes here. Anyways. Most enticing thing about the stuff. Sorry. Apparently somebody couldn't wait around for me. Jeez. Imagine quantum computing, but, and first of all, the way they're actually doing quantum computing compared to the way quantum computing was theorized based upon a pure understanding of quantum mechanics is bullshit. They're basically bullshitting themselves into thinking, hey, look, we're cheating in time. No, you're not. You're just bullshitting yourselves. But imagine if Conway, are we back? Multispectral computing. All right. So essentially, instead of data being communicated an increment at a time, it can be communicated along the same path several different colors at a time. That's what basically the gathering and the cataloging of the different resonance properties would yield, again, if the theory's correct. But anyways, so Conway, what the hell's going on with the Brexit thing? You wanna give me your opinion, how you see it, or whatever? Yeah. Do you think they'll be able to prevent the border from getting hard? I just realized I don't have to put kids on buses tomorrow, so I could smoke a couple more cigarettes and I'll be fine. So that's what May supposedly, I don't know if you heard her little speech. Her speeches now, huh? But she's saying she wants to stop people from coming in and out of Great Britain, except the Irish. Well, like, how this winds up playing out is going to be very interesting to see. I think London needs to kick May out almost as bad as we need to kick Trump out. But at least they did better than having Nigel Farage. Bunch of damn Russian shills, a lot of them. Anyways. Well, I guess that's all for the night. Can you think of anything else in quantum or physics or anything like that? I think it'd be really cool if this allowed mathematical predictability of radiation in a way that made it just much more usable. Oh, they're trying to convince Ireland to leave the EU. Huh. Right. It's just what I was thinking. That'd be just like, so they want to make you part of Britain again. Exit. All right, brother. Well, thanks for coming to hang out as always. Let me go ahead and call it a broadcast there. I don't know what the hell to do with this theory. You know? I don't know, like, where do I go from here? Right? Anyways, I gotta get some sleep. Take it easy. Thanks for watching. And anybody who's watching this in the future, don't forget to click the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Because, you know, that matters and whatnot. Peace.